Well, you're ready to start a woodworking project. You got a set of plans, some material. Where do you begin? My suggestion is to start with the pieces that everybody's going to ooh and ah over, and a lot of times they're the biggest pieces. Most of the time you end up with boards that are 4 to 10 inches wide. You got to work with them. So how do we go about getting a large board like this and making it look like it's one piece or as close as possible? We're going to pay careful attention when we select our material. We're going to do a proper job on the joiner. And we're going to glue the boards together. And if everything's followed correctly, you can have a piece that gives the illusion of it's one solid block of wood, or at least it looks good when it's glued up together. The boards are rough cut, a couple to 3 inches longer. And when I put them together, this width is about 1 inch or 2 wider than what I need for a finished size. The next step is to flip the boards around and find the best orientation. What I'm looking for is grain matching, which means straight grain, cathedral grain, trying to coordinate those together. You don't want to arch next to a straight line right at the seam, and it'll be pretty obvious that there's a seam there. The other thing you want to do is look for the colors of the boards. Boards are a lot like people. No two have the same skin tone. No two boards have exactly the same color, even if they're from the same type of tree. The best way to do this is to take your material from the same board if possible. These came from sequenced boards. Or if you can know you're getting it from the same tree, that'll help keep your colors together. Otherwise, put a dark stain on your project and that'll help blend all the colors together. Now, if you use boards that are 8, 9, 10 inches wide, you're going to need to do what something is called alternating the growth rings. The tree's obviously round. We're cutting it flat. So the growth rings in most lumber will have an arching effect. The wider the board, the more likely this will be to cup and to arch over time. So the wide boards, you want to make sure one goes up, one goes down, has the equal and opposite reaction, if you remember back from science class. However, if you stick to the 4 to 7 inch wide pieces, you can focus primarily on the grain matching and the color matching rather than alternating the grain pattern. That way that's not necessarily absolute, but if you can, go ahead. So once I get the orientation that I like, I'm going to do some sort of marking. My particular method is a cabinet maker's triangle. And especially, I can use letters, I can use numbers. In most cases, you're going to have more than one panel, like on a blanket chest or cabinet door, so you want to make sure you label them. So when you go back to the joiner to perfectly straighten up an edge, everything gets back in the same orientation. Now, if you notice here, the edge is not perfectly straight, perfectly tight. We want these tight so when you just push them together with your hands, it gives the illusion that it's one solid board. So to accomplish that, we're going to go back to the joiner, and we're going to make sure everything's extremely tight up against the fence, and we're going to go a little bit slower so it does a nice clean pass. Now you can see, when we're back here at the workbench, that by following proper joiner techniques, you can get an edge that almost disappears. And the better your grain matching is, the more likely that's going to happen. You'll give the illusion that it's one piece. You want to have all your materials ready to go. Glue has a working time of about 5 to 10 minutes. So you're going to want to be prepped, you're going to want to be ready to go. You're going to want to do what's called a dry fit. Make sure everything works together, your clamps are in position. How many clamps do you need? In my example, I've got 3 clamps. The rule is 1 per foot, and throw in an extra. Now, the other things you're going to need, obviously the glue, and in most cases you're going to need a wet rag if you have to move your board after the panel's glued up. I've got the clamps positioned to where it's about 3 or 4 inches from the end, and I've almost got them tight. My joint looks good. I'm going to flip one board up. Apply a generous, not generous, but a nice bead of glue. Spread it out with your finger so it gets smooth, even coverage. I'm going to have arguments among woodworkers. I know this. I only glue one side. As long as you get a good glue coat, there's no argument that you need to have good glue coverage. What I do to not have to do the second side is I just over glue it a little bit and rub them together, so now there is glue on both surfaces essentially. Now you notice I have 3 clamps, and one of them sitting here off to the side. These 2 clamps, once I snug them up, we're going to want to put pressure, and it's going to want to buckle upward. So we're actually going to apply this clamp on the top. When I glue this up, I just want to snug it to where the glue starts to squeeze out. I don't want to bow the panel, but I do want to make sure it's lined up. You notice my ends aren't lined up. We want to focus on getting the panel as close as we can to in line. Now on this clamp, I don't want it to touch, because there is a chemical reaction between steel and glue. It leaves a dark spot. So either place a block of wood to hold the clamp off the board, or just hold it up with your finger as you tighten it. Now, to the rag. You want to wash the glue off. And get as much as you can off now while you have the chance. Again, this is going to cause some argument among woodworkers, but we are talking woodworking class here. If you could leave this board sit exactly where it was for 2 to 4 hours, which is what it takes to dry, before you want to remove the clamps, and let all the glue drop down, we could take a paint scraper and the little beads would just chip right off, no problem. But we're in a woodworking shop full of students, hour by hour. We've got to move this somewhere. So the arguments are you can spread the glue, and that would actually do more damage than leaving it there itself. That's why I said it needs to be a wet rag to where you have to dry your hands if you touch it, but not where it's dripping. That way you don't spread it and cause more problems like I just mentioned. Wherever there's dry glue, stain will not penetrate, and you'll have light spots when you go to stain it, so keep that in mind. If you're in my woodworking class, there's some things I want on the board. I want your name, your class hour, the date that you glued the panel up, but I want the time it's glued up. That way if you glue it up in the morning, I know what time I can pull the clamps and let another student use it. So keep that in mind if you're in one of my classes. So once the panel's glued up, we're going to set it to dry, and like I said, it needs to dry for 2 to 4 hours. So you want to remove as much glue as possible. You can use a belt sander or hand sander, or my method is a scraper. You want to clamp your board down and put your body into it. Alright, now the panel's all glued, you scrape the glue off. Your instructor needs to check your board if you're in a woodworking class. Again, if you're in a woodworking class, check with your instructor. I know in my classes I don't let them use the planer without me inspecting the board first. If you have a series of panels, like for example on a blanket chest, you want to do this in sequence, send all 3, 4 boards through, and then adjust the planer. That will ensure that they're all the same thickness in the end. With careful board selection and proper joiner techniques, you can glue up a panel that possibly can give the illusion that it is one solid piece of wood. People thinking that you haven't even built any of the case pieces yet to make this blanket chest. Why are you worried about the raised panels? Well, I was able to select the best looking pieces, the widest pieces that I needed, and the best looking color for the parts and pieces that everybody's going to ooh and ah over. That way, these pieces are set aside, they're reserved. They're a couple inches longer, a couple inches wider than what I need. And when I get the final dimensions, I'll cut it down to that size. But don't do it until then, just in case you oversize or undersize one of your other pieces. This could be fit or cut to fit that instead. Again, with careful board selection, proper techniques, planning ahead, paying attention to the details, will take your project from a good project to a great one. Pay attention to the details. Now get out in the workshop and make some sawdust of your own.